welcome to Inside Pleasantville Schools. I'm your host, Emily Persons, Board of Ed trustee. And today I'm here with our Superintendent of Schools, Mary Fox-Alter. And we are here to talk about reopening schools in September, a topic that is something we're all really encouraged to learn about. So, Mary?
Well, first of all, I'm excited to be doing this, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity for the community to engage, not just on today's topic, but I'm looking forward to future shows along Inside Pleasantville. We can talk about our schools and a lot of different programs and activities that are taking place to help inform our community.
I agree. You know, keeping the community informed is really important, and something that we've talked about in the communications committee is what is the message and how do we get the message to the people? How do we communicate? And it's changed from print to social media, and there's so much important information that's out there that's in here that we need to get out there. So I think this will be great to, you know, give another avenue for people to hear what you have to say and what some of the other stakeholders in the district have to say about the education of all the students.
So I do know this is a very timely topic.
Yes.
Recently we had an outreach to our community to ask if anyone wanted to volunteer to be part of a reentry committee, a reopening committee, to take a look at some of the information that's in front of us, some of the tasks, and to engage with this one goal of getting all of our kids back on campus in the fall in whatever way, shape, or it's going to look like, but let's have that conversation and explore the different options.
Right. We all want that, from our preschool students to our graduate students in college. Everybody is like, please let us get our kids back on campus because we're tired of being isolated. So, you know, what does that look like? I mean, you know, we listen to Governor Cuomo, and we know that we have to follow the guidelines from the CDC and all of that, and the guidelines are changing so rapidly. So how do we put together guidelines that they require in just a month or so? How do we put together these guidelines or a plan, when we don't have very strong guidelines from our governor? How do we do that?
Great question. Great question. So what we're looking at here is an iterative process that as soon as we get new information, we go back and go a first touch, a second touch, a third touch. And we want to involve as many voices and stakeholders as possible. So in our committee, we have representatives from all of our bargaining units, we have our parent organizations, we have community members, we have administrators, we have our business official, our buildings and grounds staff, our CSEA staff, all involved in this. And then in each building, we have committees set up very similar. The point being is that although we have nothing in writing from the state of New York, there are some incredible plans out there from Maryland, from Montana, from Missouri. Just recently, the state of Connecticut issued some guidance on opening up for their special needs kids in an extended year program. So we're looking at all of that, and also at the CDC guidelines, which really sets a benchmark. So the overarching thoughts is that we do know that essential to all reopening plans, you need to maintain three things. You need to maintain healthy environments, you need to maintain healthy operations, and you have to have protocols for wellness for your staff and for your students. And you take those three areas and identify what you mean when you say that, and you operationalize them into the functions of schools. And we are looking in Pleasantville, our committee is looking at 10 functions.
And of those functions, you've got, for example, instruction and facilities and athletics, technology. There's 10 different categories of functions. What do you think is the biggest hurdle? You know, one or two of the biggest hurdles for us. You know, facilities seems like that might be kind of easy because it's like we just need to keep it clean. You might have to move a little bit of the furniture around. What do you think is one of the biggest hurdles that we're going to face as a district?
Clearly, you're absolutely right. Although under the guide of maintaining healthy environments, we're certainly looking at how are we cleaning, how are we disinfecting the common areas that are touched, shared objects. You know, we're so used to, if you're in a classroom, the classroom set of scissors, the classroom set of crayons. That's not going to be the case in the fall. As individual as possible. We're looking at physical layouts in classrooms. You want all the seats facing forward. You want to have one direction in the hallways. You want kids not to be in the hallways at the same time. You want to have some physical barriers put in place, as well as some guides on the floors, particularly if you think about the elementary school. You want to have visual guidelines so that when kids are traveling, that's important. And what do we do about communal spaces? What do we do about food service? So we have to break all those down. The other little piece in terms of healthy operations, and this is where we're going to get to the point of your question, it's like we have to maintain wellness checks for staff and for students, and what did they look like? We are purchasing some of those heat-based non-touch thermometers. And we put in a purchase order in March, but we haven't received them yet. So we do have some challenges along those areas. We also need to make sure that large groups shut down our buildings at night so that we limit the amount of contact from outside groups that might want to come into the building.
That's a big thing, because we have a lot of outside groups who use the gym in the evening and things like that.
So that might look different in the fall, and it might look different for 2 months and then change again as we head into winter. Who knows? But going back to your essential question, so one of the objectives under maintaining healthy operations is to reduce density. And how do you reduce density? A lot of people are talking about like hybrid or staggered scheduling. So reducing density at arrival. You could have a window for arrival times and then a window for dismissal times. Again, reducing density.
Okay, so that means that instead of the start time being 8:15 for the elementary school, you might have a staggered start time. Okay.
And a window for that, a window of arrival.
So that way you don't have massive groups of kids coming in the door at the same time. Probably easier to do in the high school because you have a few points of entry and you have kids who start first period, second period, third period, and they don't have to be in school. But your elementary school is probably the most difficult to stagger that because everybody comes in at the same time. But then you have, you know, if you've got this density, what do you call it? Density reduction. You know, I guess that means you might have fewer kids on, we were saying at the meeting the other day, A days and B days. So you have some kids coming to school on Monday, some kids coming to school on Tuesday. Would there be live classes so that if it's the day that they're home, they would still be in the live class? So there's a lot there. There's a lot to that question.
So if you took a look at the function of instruction, right? So we're looking at that function and what are the tasks associated with reducing density within that. And then at the Bedford Road School, at the middle school, at the high school, and also for our students with disabilities. So this committee, what they're looking at is taking a look at the function of instruction, and maybe the task could be, how do I reduce density at arrival and drop-off at the Bedford Road School? How do I do it at the middle school? How do I do it at the high school? So each of the building level committees and our district committee are putting in tasks that they believe will accomplish that objective. So yes, that would be for arrival and dismissal. Now let's take density reduction in the classroom, all right, which is the heart of your question. So without knowing exactly what the guidelines will be, the governor could come out and say, you need to reduce the density in your building by 50% as opposed to reduce the density in a classroom specific.
That's a really big difference, because if it's just in the classroom, you think about some of the spaces that we have in the building that could be used. You know, maybe the gym, for example, could be used, or even in the warm weather, some of the classes could be outside.
Outside, absolutely.
And that would allow for a density reduction, right?
Right.
So it's so complicated.
First of all, at this moment, for what we know here in June, and again, remember what I said in the beginning, the ability to pivot, and this is an iterative process as we get information. But right now, if you were looking at this, clearly in the fall, we wouldn't have a place in our instructional program for a large chorus class with everyone singing together because of the spittle that can come out, or even a PE class where you have children getting excited, running around from stations, you know, the type of contact. So you'd have to restructure those environments, you know, saxophones, trombones.
Right.
So if you were able to take your large spaces, make them for different, very targeted activities, and provide those experiences in a different way, and it could be a combination of an e-learning environment or individual Zoom activities where you had the in-class instruction to be, particularly in the elementary school, a real honing in on those English language arts and those mathematical skills, trying to make sure to see where we were in the development of discrete skills and trying to measure the gaps, whether it's in achievement or learning of younger children and older children too. But these would be the approaches we would took. So one of the models out there is that at the elementary school, let's say you did an A day and a B day, and you did it over a 2-week cycle. You would have instruction for a certain group of students in class, and then the B day, when they were home, you could do live and e-learning classes with the teachers in school doing lots of different related arts activities, library, computer, PE, maybe music or art, just for that period. And then again, another group of kids comes in on the next cycle in person, and then we flip it. All of these are being looked at. There's another model out there that speaks about, and it's because of the child care aspect and the development of real discrete skills in the elementary and primary grades.
What do you mean by discrete skills?
A discrete skill is this ability of numeration or reading comprehension. You know, because at some point when we went back to that idea of the growth model but back in the Common Core in the testing days, at some point when a child is learning, let's say, American history or global studies, and they start at the beginning of the year, do they grow in their learning, or is it achievement and academics? Earlier in their grades, sometimes you're trying to teach numeracy or this idea of decoding in terms of a mathematical problem. Maybe a child might have an issue with English language arts, not necessarily math. So we really try to hone in on that development of those discrete foundational skills, and that tends as the child gets older,
because they're learning, you know, their brains are growing at different, you know, or developing rather at different rates, and with all of so the
so important. So some people there, and you'll see these models out there in different states, believe that, you know, you density reduce your elementary school, but you bring in all kids, either K-5 or K-6 every day, and then you do a hybrid A-B day for grades 7 to 12 for a couple of months. That's another model that's out there. That tends to hone in on what we said about the development of really foundational skills. I'll use that word, it's better, foundational skills for kids, particularly in the elementary grades, and it also helps support childcare needs of parents. However, the other side of it is that, you know, your grades 7 through 12, a lot of those kids,
you don't want them home alone. You know, if parents are finally able to get back to work, we don't really want to have a situation where there are too many students, high school students, you know, 7 through 12, where they're home alone, because all kinds of things can happen in those circumstances. So it is, you know, every aspect of this is complicated. You know, and one of the things that we know is that so much of a student's learning experience happens after school. with the after-school activities, the clubs that they get to join from the elementary school, because we have activities for our elementary school students as well.
Right.
You know, the student government and the yearbook and all those different clubs and the arts, the plays, and how are we going to be able, and I know there's no answer right this minute, but you know, how can we get those things back in person? Because it's not the same to be in a Zoom play, for example, or something like that. So that's a challenge.
It will be, but we have to keep in mind our 3 overarching goals. How do we maintain healthy operations? How do we maintain a healthy environment?
Right.
And then how do we monitor the health and wellness of staff and students?
Right.
So every single conversation we have about each of those activities must address that. So one of the things in terms of maintaining a healthy environment we see as reducing contact or use of our facilities by outside groups.
Right.
Right off the bat, right starting in the fall, because then you don't have that much exposure. It's easier to clean the facility. So in a situation or an environment like that, I would clearly think, is there an opportunity for a high school club at density reduced to maybe use the auditorium or outside in the field? Absolutely,
that
we'll
might
be
be
looking
possible.
at that. Might be possible.
Right.
But again, it would mean that so many of our community members that are used to using our facilities, there's going to be a period of time where that will change. And I know that will be a conversation at our reorg meeting in July, because that's when the Board of Education does approve all of these.
Correct.
You know, a real important aspect of a reopening plan falls under the rule of governance, one of the 10 functions, and governance is board policy. And that's just the first example of function governance, and how does that change? Because
some of the policies might conflict with what we have to do. Again, we use this word flexibility. We're using this word flexibility all over the place because it is a time where we have to be flexible. And one of the, you know, we think about those Halloween kids. You can't have masks when you're in the Halloween parade. Well, we're not allowed to have masks. That's part of the code of conduct. But now
mask will be a requirement.
So there's an example, a very easy example of how we'll have to look at the code of conduct and make, I guess, what would we do? Make a blanket statement? Because you can't possibly make a policy for everything.
No, but you could have a resolution. The board could adopt a resolution that would create flexibility where there's a contradiction in a school district policy and an executive order, and or the maintaining healthy environments and operations and health of staff in your reentry plan.
Right.
So that could
cover that. So
and we would have to, on a regular basis, the administrative team working with Dr. Roy, our doctor, our nurses, to make sure that we're addressing all of these. I mean, even the simple factor of trying to take someone's temperature. We have FERPA, student privacy, and we have HIPAA laws that protect adults.
Right.
You know, so we have to make sure that we're implementing all of these policies while protecting a level of privacy. And that has a natural tension. So let's say, for example, we do have a rolling outbreak, because if you're reading the news, you'll see that people are saying that is a possibility in the fall and the winter we'll have an outbreak. So if we have limited our contact, meaning you keep all kids in one classroom, you've reduced density, you've done all kinds of wellness checks, and you might be able to close a section of a building as opposed to the school, as opposed to the entire district for cleaning and operations there.
Right.
So as we come full circle about that wellness check, and then how do you inform people that we had an outbreak, but yet maintaining the privacy of the adult or the student.
Right, because we've all as parents received the letter, you know, that there was an influenza in those, and you know, lice in the grade. You know, we have gotten that, but it's all very vague as to, you know, to hide to protect the privacy.
But the unique feature this time, we are hearing that we will probably be required to do some level of contact tracing, which will then help. And then at that point, you will have a real vehicle in order to inform people, as
Right.
opposed to
Right.
people whose risk assessment, if you had an outbreak, was 0 and somebody who was all the way up to a 10.
Right. You know, and one of the things that we see that seems to be working well, you know, in stores and things like that are the glass, or not glass, the kind of plexiglass or plastic partitions that protect the checkout counters in stores and things like that. And some people are wearing those clear face masks. What do you think? Maybe some of the desks in the offices could have some kind of partition, teachers' desks?
Mm-hmm. So I'm certainly thinking under the function of facilities that someone in our groups would identify, well, here's a task. How do I, when I'm in close proximity, what are some of the tools out there we can use to protect the health and welfare of everyone involved who might be in there? So right off the bat, you could create a physical barrier, but believe it or not, in the state of New York, plexiglass is not allowed to be used in schools because it's flammable. So we're looking at a different polycarbonate type material in areas where we want to do that.
There's so many details.
Yes.
It's like, who would know that?
Right.
You know, so you think something's so easy, it's like, no, we can't use that, so we have to use a different material. You know, and the other thought that you mentioned before, or that's been mentioned in some of these plans, is like, particularly in the middle school and the high school, is that the students stay in one classroom and the teachers travel, because that reduces the number of people walking around the building. But then you think, well, that'll be kind of hard on the kids if they stay in one classroom all day. So then you have to figure out ways of getting them to get out and move around.
Get outside, move around, go outdoors, but not when others are there. So it's another layer of schedules.
Of thought as to how you might be able to, it's really, there's so many tentacles.
Right. So I do love this approach we've taken where we're using Microsoft Forms and picking out individual tasks and thoughts behind it, and then associating with the function to generate this real brainstorming of ideas and to bring them back and analyze them. This is a wonderful community, and if we're all focused on this goal, there's so many bright people out there. It's great to gather all of this information together and take a look to create a plan that we've looked at everything possible and heard the many different voices. At the end of the day, we will please no one. I think
we'll please some. We're going to please everybody. We're going to please no one. There's going to be all kinds of things. And look, and this is the thing. Even with the high school graduation, summer camps, every day the governor's making a different decision, and we have to be so careful, day by day, and not quickly jump to putting anybody into danger. And it's even if we have to go to an A/B day, yes, there's going to be some parents who say, well, why can't my kids go to school every single day? I'm just one category that I am so glad we really don't have to worry too much about is the transportation.
Oh, yes.
Oh my goodness. Every day when we talk about our budget and all kinds of things that relate to money, that I feel for the districts that have to do that, because it's another headache that will be very complicated to deal with. So we have just a small amount of transportation issues.
We do. So I'm so glad you brought that up. Right now, the current guidance is on a regular yellow school bus, you could only go to 25% capacity to do that distancy and density reduction and wellness of maintaining a healthy environment. However, as you mentioned, we do provide transportation for our private and parochial students. We do receive our Pecanico Hills students who come from Pecanico Hills to our high school. They are bused here. And we also do take in tuition into our programs for some of our students with disabilities. So transportation will be a concern for us, but not nearly to the level where you have to transport all 1,700 students, multiple times a day. The other little piece associated with transportation, though, is athletics. So we do spend, the bigger fees in athletics happen to be the fees we spend for officiating,
Right.
And for transportation, taking our team. So that will be a challenge in the fall as we move towards that.
Right.
And also our bus companies, I know people have read in the media that there are some bus companies that have struggled between the period March 18th until now.
Because nobody's in school.
And so what transportation providers will be around in the fall, and are they able to make sure that their licenses, their certification, everything is ready to go. So that's a whole other challenge.
Wow.
I mean, another challenge too is food service. What does lunch look like?
Right.
You know, will parents feel comfortable purchasing lunch in school as opposed to, you know, wanting to bring their own? We clearly know the simple things is that we have to use disposable utensils.
Right.
We can't have common ketchup or mustard. They all need to be individual things. Will lunch look like a grab-and-go environment where they would take their lunch, bring it back to their classrooms to eat?
But that's a big part of the social component of school, where lunch is a moment where the kids can kind of regroup with their peer, you know, their friends, and that's such an important time to recharge.
Yeah.
So, well, we're almost out of time. What final comments? I mean, I think we've covered so many different categories, and then we didn't even, I mean, we could probably sit here for another 2 hours
Easily,
and
Emily,
talk about
easily.
all these things. But, you know, from the transportation to the wellness to the classroom, I mean, we didn't talk about sports, and I know that that's a very sensitive subject for so many people because, you know, our seniors this year didn't get their final moments on the field, and everyone's ready for the fall. Tennis and track or cross country we can do easily because that's an individual sport.
Right. And we'll just wait for further guidance on this. You know, a phrase the board uses all the time, you plan for the worst, hope for the best, and as long as we've looked at everything and how we can go about it, I mean, even things like football, you know, you can buy plastic shields for a helmet, you can clean the locker rooms, you can take care of all of that. But an interesting question would be, will it be allowed? Will the rules be consistent across Section 1? We are looking for guidance in this area.
That might be something that just, you know, maybe sports don't start until October, or it might, you know, who knows? It's going to be a very different model.
Right.
So, well, you know, I'm glad to be on the committee. I'm glad to roll up my sleeves. Look, I've already got them rolled up. You know, and even though we have this set committee of people, I think one thing that is true for the district always is welcoming comments from everybody and anybody. You know, the emails are there. If anybody has a comment, we always welcome that from students as well as parents and community members. So I think that as long as everyone continues to be level-headed and calm, because we're in uncharted territory.
Right. But
You know?
on one end, it's exciting, and the thought that we're going to figure out a way to get our kids back into our schools in September is super energizing and exciting. So,
well, I think that the most important for me as a board member and as a parent is that you are at the helm here, because there is nobody who knows state education law like you. And whatever has to happen, you will make sure that we follow carefully for the protection of our staff and our students. And at the end of the day, that's the most important thing, is that everybody is protected and in a healthy environment so that they can do what they need to do, which is to educate and be educated. All of us. So on that note, thank you.
Thank you. And here's to looking at how we're going to maintain healthy environments, healthy operation, and the health and wellness of our students and staff. All right.
So thank you so much for joining this edition of Inside Pleasantville Schools. Have a great day.